And with that, I have the pleasure of introducing Cynthia Macluskie. And I imagine most of you may know Cynthia. I'm so grateful to have you here today to talk a little bit about disabled adult child benefits. And I happen to get a sneak peek, so I know we're going to learn about some other Medicaid, Medicare kind of things and a whole host of topics. So thank you for joining us today.
Awesome. I'm so excited. This is my favorite topic. I don't know if
That's
it's
a new one.
right. Um, so just as background who I am, I'm a mom of an adult child with autism. Excuse me, he's 25 now. And I've spent the last 22 years advocating with Access, ALTCS, DDD, and the health plans. And through that process, I became an expert in Medicaid. And I've spoken nationally, actually, on Medicaid. The governor appointed me to the advisory committee for ISD, and we did redesign the Medicaid system for our population. And again, I was one of the moms that passed autism insurance legislation, and we had to negotiate with health plans. So I've always had an interest in navigating the system, getting the most bang for your buck. And so when my son went off to college, I was like, what am I going to be when I grow up? And I decided I'll do insurance because pretty much that's all I talk about anyways. And it's my favorite topic, not everybody's, but mine. And then through that process, I discovered all sorts of benefits that nobody was talking about. And so that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the Disabled Adult Child Program, what it is and what are the benefits. And it is part of Social Security, and it's a little known program that a lot of people are in but don't know that they're in. So I'm going to start with talking about Social Security, then we'll kind of ease our way into the Disabled Adult Child Program. We'll talk about Social Security disability, Access and ALTCS, and how that works with it, and then Medicare, and what your choices are. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. A lot of people, when they their child turns 18, they will apply for SSI. And SSI is supplemental security insurance, and it's basically a needs-based way to get money. It comes from the general fund. You don't earn it, you don't pay into it. It is something that we make available to people who are aged, which is over 65, blind or disabled, who are low income. And it's basically cash for basic needs. So it's unlike SSDI, you're not using work credits to earn that kind of money. So when you're applying for Social Security for your child, this is the benefit you're applying for, SSI. And so you have to be able to prove that the person is disabled. You're making the case that they're not going to be able to support themselves through employment. And then you submit a packet of information to Social Security that basically demonstrates that. And you can still apply even if you think your child will be employable at some point. There's lots of people who are on SSI and are employed. They tend to be underemployed, or they use programs like Ticket to Work. So it doesn't preclude you from being employed. You do have to have resources below 2,000. Your house and your car does not count, but pretty much everything else does. So this isn't a big deal for our population, obviously, because to qualify for ALTCS, you also have to have limited resources, and $2,000 is the exact same amount. So it shouldn't affect, you should already be there. And then you can apply online. It's very simple to apply. Some people end up applying for SSI and SSDI. Some people end up just applying for SSI. You can apply for both. SSDI will be denied because they don't have any work credits. They didn't pay into the system. But when people are applying, Sometimes they make you apply for any program that you might qualify for. So I have heard families apply for both. When we're doing the application process, what's interesting to me as a mom is I hear so many people get SSI pretty easily, and then I hear other people struggle or get denied. And I look at their children and I simply don't see the difference. So I started asking families, what did they think the difference was? Why, what was happening? And I think it's just the act of navigating the system again. So one of the things I've heard from families that have really struggled is they'll like fill out a form with Social Security that gives Social Security the right to like collect all the records. From what I've heard, that can go well or it can go not well. And I know one family that was denied simply because there were no records. They didn't collect any records. So when I asked families to give me advice, this is sort of the advice that they gave me. Build a medical record. And I would say you would want to start, well, I believe you should build a medical record all day long, every day. When you are trying to get services from the system through the health plan, through your employer plan, or through DDD, you do have to have a medical record that supports the need for those services. So you constantly want to be building that record. I would advise families to review that record, to every time you leave a doctor's appointment, ask for a copy of that record, keep it, make sure that the things that are being submitted on your child's behalf are accurate. So read the occupational therapy report, the speech therapy report, read all those reports and make sure that they are reporting accurate information. You're going to want to check and make sure that the goals are still the goals. We want to make sure we're not using the same goals over and over again. So we're building that record. We want to make sure that we're including comorbid medical conditions that impact the individual's functioning. So anxiety, depression, ADHD, gastrointestinal issues. There's a variety of things. And so you want to make sure that you're addressing everything that's impacting your child's functioning. You want to organize it. So I believe in presentation. So for my family, my husband immigrated here, and so we had to submit our paperwork with the INS. And I color coded everything. I mean, it was a beautiful binder. And when you do that, the people that receive it take you more seriously. They give you more weight in understanding the system. Whether that's true or not doesn't matter. It's all about the presentation. So you want to make sure it's organized, everything's there. You can also ask for a letter of medical diagnosis from the treating physician. You can include the MET, the IEP, psychological evaluations, letters of medical necessity. You just basically want to have everything that supports your case. You can also, families tell me, use the ABLE account for saving money so that your assets don't go over the $2,000. And then you're going to want to make sure that the Social Security office receives all the documents. So I've heard different stories from families because that's how kind of the government is. So you can deliver those documents to them. Sometimes they'll accept them, but want to get their own copies. And so I would advise you to make sure that you're double checking that they're getting the copies that they need. I have some families who set up an Excel spreadsheet, so they know everything they want to go to Social Security, and they double check to make sure the provider is faxing it and that the Social Security office has received it.
The only other thing I'd add, Cynthia, if I could, that I've heard from families and from the same experience, right, different outcomes, similar application process, is the use of language, in the sense that as a parent, you've spent your whole first 18 years of life building up independence and admiring and being so in awe of all the progress you've made. Can you talk a little bit about language in terms of perhaps if there've been a volunteer experience or if there is work in the history and how you might watch what you say, not misleading in any way, but specifically how you use your language?
So this is important with any system you're engaged with. What we don't want to do is present our child or adult in the very best light. We have to paint a realistic picture. So as a parent, we have those rose-colored glasses on. We're going to always see our kids in their very best light. That's really the point of being a parent, is being that champion and seeing every win for that win. But that's not how you engage in a system. So we need to be realistic and look at what they can do and what they can't do, and understand that just because we're informing the system of things they can't do is not predictive of their life. It's just navigating the appropriate system with the appropriate language. So I think that when we're engaging with voc rehab, Social Security, DDD, we need to make sure that we are using the language of someone who's an objective outsider, measuring their ability to the ability of what they should be able to do with typical peers. And that can be a painful process. So what I did when my child was younger is I had a notebook where I wrote all the maladaptive things that he did. And then I had this beautiful leather, and I still have this beautiful leather bound journal where I write all the incredible things he's done and accomplishes. There are two different things. The leather journal is my mom heart celebrating every win. And the notebook is like, okay, here's where we are, and I'm charting as a nurse of everything that we're failing at right now. And I think it's really important to see yourself as two different people when you're going through that system.
Thank you. That helps so much.
Hard. It's
yeah.
so hard.
Impossible, but it's so important, just because that is one of the big things too. When I'm talking to clients and I'm hearing them say these things, I'm like, oh, we got to watch our language, but in the best way. So thank you for sharing that, because that's awesome.
And also, I would also add, it's important to teach our children and adults that the labels are not who they are. So in our family, we're very clear. Labels get you access to care, but labels are not how you identify. You are this whole human being. I am Cynthia, all the great things and all the bad things rolled into one. I'm not a bunch of labels that you see. And it's important to just have a distinction between that, I think.
Absolutely. I'm lucky that not everybody just follows the label of me being an attorney. I get in trouble.
Okay, you don't like those attorney jokes. Yeah.
I think they're quite funny, but that's just because I don't label myself entirely that way. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about being approved for SSI and what that means. A whole new world.
Yeah, and one of the reasons we're talking about SSI is because you can't be in the DAC program if you don't have Social Security. So that's the very first step. And most people apply without even knowing it's a step to the DAC program. They just apply because that's what they're told to do. That's what their friends are advising, whatever, but they don't always know the complete ramifications of applying, right? So once you're approved, you do have to charge your child's rent. And if you don't charge them rent, then Social Security will take a third of that payment and keep it. So it's important to know to do that. I'm not an expert on the best way to do that. There's two different ways to do it. One's fair share and one's rent as a tenant. I do know that during COVID, they waived the annual report and things like that, but COVID's over now. And so the government's picking up where they left off. So you are going to be expected to have to do an annual report. There is going to be reviews and redetermination. So you just want to make sure, again, that you're keeping all your paperwork organized and that you're following the rules of Social Security. A couple other things I've heard from families is Social Security doesn't always accept guardianship. Like that's not something they view as being, they just don't. So you can be a representative payee. You can go down, there's several ways to handle that, but guardianship paperwork, I don't believe takes care of what their requirement is. Is that correct, Emily?
That is, they get to have and make and follow their own rules. So sometimes, I'll encourage folks, if they've already got the guardianship in place, to bring a copy as part of their well-prepared and organized binder, but they're not going to take the fact that the court has made a ruling as suggestive that automatically enables them to be eligible for Social Security, or that you have to go through that representative payee process as well. So absolutely.
Yep. So, yep, the government has its own rules. So right now, this year, the amount of money is $914. Every year it goes up a little bit, but this year it's $914. That's the amount. And so, your child can use that money to take care of their needs. We can't hoard that money in a bank account because then our resources would be too high. So again, a lot of families recommend using ABLE. I'm not an expert on ABLE either, but I know it's a good resource for families.
I'll just say there are a few other webinars in which we talk about all those different pieces, and lots of education out there, and encourage folks to look into it.
Absolutely, because each one of these things could be an hour by itself.
Pretty soon we're just going to start a college of
that would actually be good.
Yeah.
I like that. Okay, so the Social Security Disabled Adult Child Program, the way that it works is it allows an adult child to receive disability benefits solely on their parents' work record. So they can earn up to 1/2 of the parent's full retirement benefit, and it does not impact the parent's retirement benefit. So just because your child's getting a benefit from it doesn't decrease your own benefit. And one of the things that's important for planning long-term is when both parents pass away, the child will get 75% of the benefit. So how do you qualify? First, you have to be over the age of 18. You have to be disabled before you're 22. You have to be on SSI. And then one of the parents has to either be retired, disabled, or has passed away. The parent also has to have enough work credits, and you have to be unmarried. The unmarried part was surprising to me, and I have run across one family where Social Security gave them the wrong information, and they got married, and they lost this benefit. And there's actually nothing you can do to repair that mistake. You can't get a divorce, annulment, nothing. Once you lose the benefit because of marriage, you lose it. The only exception is that a DAC person marries another DAC person. Then they can both keep those benefits. But if a DAC person marries someone who's not a DAC person, they would lose that benefit. So it's just important to know. So let's talk about SSDI. So SSDI is benefits that you earned because you worked and you paid into the system, and you have work credits, and those work credits allow you to get SSDI. I have seen some of our adults actually qualify for SSDI on their own work record. So if you're under 24, you have to have a total of 6 work credits. And what that looks like right now is each work credit for 2023 is $1,640. You can earn 4 work credits a year. So by the time they're 24, they would have had to have earned $9,840. And I know 4 or 5 people who've managed to qualify for SSDI on their own work record. Now, when you qualify on your own work record, you have not paid into the system very much. So it's very possible that your SSDI payment is less than the $914. And so if that's the case, you'll get SSDI and SSI so that you have the total amount of $914 because that's the minimum level. And then I want to talk about the pickle rule, which is something most people do not know about, and access sometimes forgets about and has to be reminded. So what the pickle rule says is if you qualified for SSI and you got Medicaid, so you turned 18, you got SSI, you're making $914, and then your parent retires and suddenly you're making, let's say, $2,000, $1,500, whatever, but you're making more than what would normally qualify you for Medicaid. The pickle rule protects you and you maintain your eligibility for Medicaid and you're not to be removed. I see at least 2 to 3 times a year someone being removed when they shouldn't be removed. And that happens because this is such a rare occurrence. And the computer software that Access uses is so old that some of the stuff is done manually and just gets missed or done incorrectly. So just file that away in case it ever happens. It's called the pickle rule. Okay, so Access is like an umbrella. It has 3 programs. So there's Medicaid for the low income, there's Medicaid for the elderly and physically disabled, or there's Medicaid for the developmentally disabled. So sometimes someone with autism will not qualify for DDD ALTCS, but they will qualify for SSI, and then they get Medicaid just by virtue of qualifying for SSI. A lot of families with children and adults on DDD have the ALTCS program, and there's differences between Access and ALTCS that are important to know. So Access provides all your typical things: doctor's visits, hospital, pregnancy care, behavioral health services, labs. I mean, any kind of typical medical service. ALTCS covers additional things. So day treatment, job training, homemaking, dental. So Access covers dental until 21 it doesn't. So dental is important, habilitation, respite, all of this. So these are additional services. There are long-term care services that you don't get with Access, but you do get with ALTCS. EPSDT is a really important concept that, I mean, I wish I had shirts that say got EPSDT, like got milk, because our families have EPSDT, but they don't know what it is, and they don't know how important it is, and they don't know how much it impacts their ability to access services. So EPSDT is early periodic screening, diagnosis, and treatment. And it is the most generous and most liberal medical necessity language. And what it says is that if you can prove something will ameliorate your child's condition, regardless if it's a covered benefit, regardless if it's experimental, if you can prove it'll ameliorate a child's condition, the state has to pay for it. And we used the EPSDT language to negotiate with the governor's office and get ABA therapy covered through Access ALTCS. And so very important language, but guess what? EPSDT does not apply once you turn 21. So then the medical necessity looks more like a Medicare medical necessity, not nearly as generous. And that is an important thing to plan for. And so one of the things that happens with that is dental, vision, and hearing pretty much go away for anyone on Access once they turn 21. Access will provide $1,000 emergency only benefit to Access members over 21. And we fought really hard for that. I sat on a dental committee because there was a time where you didn't even get that. And what we do know is dental is very important to your actual physical health. And people have died because they didn't get dental care. So dental is very important. And at 21, you lose it except for emergency dental. And when they say emergency, they mean truly an emergency. And then ALTCS members, they get $1,000 of comprehensive and $1,000 emergency. And then no vision or hearing. That's all not covered anymore once you're 21. Something else that happens is who delivers the service changes. So DDD will still cover respite, rehabilitation, and attendant care. Those are considered home and community services. DDD will also continue to provide speech and OT, but physical therapy is now provided by the health plan, and behavioral health services are provided by the health plan. They are under 21 and over 21. Important to know. So why are we talking about Medicare? How did that come in? Well, guess what? When you qualify for SSDI, after 24 months, you qualify for Medicare. So what normally happens in our community is that a parent goes to the mailbox and there's a Medicare card there, and they don't know why. They didn't order it, and they don't understand it. And some parents have been known to send it back and say, I don't want it. And there's a lot of misinformation around Medicare and the benefits for our community. And everybody has their own point of view. So my point of view is an advocate. So I want to make sure you understand the benefits, and I want to make sure you understand some of the non-benefits, let's say. So we're just going to briefly talk about Medicare, just very, very briefly. I could spend an hour and a half just on Medicare. So Part A is your hospitalization. I like to call it your room and board. So when you go to the hospital, it pays your room and board. It pays for hospice, skilled nursing, and home health. And there's all sorts of costs associated with it. However, because your adult child has Medicaid, they would not have to pay those costs. Part B is your medical, and you use that in the hospital too, because Part B is your doctors, your surgeons, your ER, MRI, CAT scan, blood work, ambulance, all of that. And the Part B premium for 2024 is $174.90. And this is one of the reasons families choose to send back the Medicare card. They don't want their child who's maybe has $1,000, $1,200 to be paying $174.90 for Medicare, especially because they don't understand what the benefit is. What's important to know is that the Part B premium is paid for by Access. So when you get a letter from Social Security, it will give you a bill. It's going to say, hey, you're going to owe this amount of money every month. It's not true. But somehow Social Security and Access, they don't really talk very well. My understanding is they only talk twice a month. You would think that computer systems could talk more frequently, but apparently no. So there's a crossover between Social Security saying you have this bill and you must pay this, then when Access picks up the bill. So generally, you shouldn't ever see a payment, but I have seen families have to pay for 1 or 2 months, but that money is paid back to the member. So very important to know this. And again, just like the pickle rule, every once in a while, the system forgets the rule. So I've seen 5 people in the last 3 months all of a sudden paying their Part B premium when they shouldn't be. And that just takes a phone call to fix that. And again, that money is paid back. So the other thing is, if you have private insurance, technically you can choose to send Part B back. But if your child is on Medicaid only, they need to keep both Part A and Part B. It should not be sent back. It's really a requirement by the system, even though some support coordinators don't seem to understand that. So now you have Medicaid and Medicare, and you have choices. But guess what? The government likes to think for you. So you do have choices, but the way the system is set up, they auto-enroll you in the choice that they've decided for you. And that is something you do not want to happen. So when you see a Medicare card come in the mail, you need to pay attention to who your insurance carrier is for Access or ALTCS, because they will be sending you documentation saying you're being auto-enrolled. And you want to say, no, thank you, do not auto-enroll me. And the reason that you want to do that is because the network for ALTCS and Access is not the same network that they're going to enroll you in. So you will be auto-enrolled into a dual Medicare Medicaid plan. And the reason that that happens is that the federal government and the state government believe that when you have coordinated benefits with Medicaid and Medicare, that your outcomes are better. And there's all sorts of great additional benefits to being enrolled in a dual plan. However, the network is not the same. So when I started being an insurance broker, I started checking for people, and I was consistently seeing that United and Mercy Care did not have doctors in their network for the dual plan that were in their network for the Access plan. And when I brought it to the attention of United, Mercy Care, and Access, all three said, not true, same network. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Here's a list of 10 doctors and one large hospital that does not take the dual plans. Well, everybody was surprised to hear that. And Access asked both carriers to run a report. And what they found was 10 to 15% of the doctors that take the Access plan do not take the dual plan. So if you're auto-enrolled in the dual plan, you will suddenly lose access to a doctor that may be very important to you and not even know it until you try to see that doctor and find out that you cannot do it. So right now, Phoenix Children's Hospital is not contracted with Medicare Advantage plans and not contracted with the dual plans. And so if you want to be able to do that, then you wouldn't want to be on the dual plan. I have heard that Mercy Care is in network, but according to Phoenix Children's Hospital, that will not last very long. Phoenix Children's Hospital has stated that they made it a policy to never accept Medicare Advantage plans. So it's just important to know. So when we're looking at what makes the most sense, we have several choices. You can look at the dual plan, and with those dual plans, you get lots of extra benefits, lots of dental, vision, hearing, tons of stuff that you wouldn't get from your regular Access plan. But you may not want that because the doctors might not be in that network. So you can also choose a Medicare Advantage plan. And that might make sense, especially if you had an employer plan, because let's say you have a couple doctors that don't take Access, but are in maybe a Medicare Advantage plan. That gets you the option to see doctors that don't accept Access. And for those doctors, if they're not Access registered, you would have a copay. But for the rest of the doctors, the hospital, and everything else, your copay would still be zero because Medicaid picks that up. So this gives you a little more freedom to maybe see a doctor that wouldn't normally be available because they're not an Access provider. Or maybe you keep Medicare, which is primary, Medicare pays 80%. Access, which is secondary, they pick up the 20%. And then you get a prescription drug plan. Because once you qualify for Medicare, you can no longer get your prescriptions filled by Medicaid. So you will need a prescription drug plan. So it's really all about the doctors. Who do you love that your child needs to see? What networks are they in? And what are the additional benefits? And you really need to look at all the plans that are available to you. So I make it a point of taking all the doctors, all the medications, and looking at all the plans, trying to find a plan that has everything in one. Sometimes you can do it, sometimes you can't. Sometimes you don't want to. So let's say you're retired military, so your child has TRICARE for life. TRICARE for life has a prescription benefit that will pay for prescriptions that Access won't pay for. And so maybe you don't want to be in a dual plan. If you have Medicare, TRICARE for life, and Medicaid, you could even go to Mayo Clinic because you have basically 100% coverage in and out of the Access Medicaid plan with the original Medicare and TRICARE for life. So it's really trying to figure out what your child needs. So sometimes they need a lot of dental and you're willing to give up a doctor. Sometimes the doctor is the most important thing. And I can't make that decision for you. You have to make that decision for you. But what's really important is not to let the system make the decision for you, because they're never going to look at doctors and benefits. They're only just going to auto enroll you in something.
Forgive me, you're probably going to get to this, but you keep saying you can't make the decision, and I just want to kind of connect the dots. So can you talk a little bit more about your professional role in this conversation with folks and how that works in terms of compensation and choice and what the best way to work with somebody is?
Absolutely. So I think it's really important to always use an independent broker, someone who represents a variety of plans. So for me, I represent almost every plan on the market. I don't represent Mercy Care because Mercy Care will not let brokers represent them. So that's the one carrier I don't represent. However, I log in their system and I'll still check doctors for people, let them know what will work, let them know the pros and cons, give them tips on where to look for the information. And the way that I get paid is if you enroll in a plan with me, the carrier pays me, they all pay me the same amount. So I'm not motivated to put you in something that's convenient for me. When you call a carrier, they're only going to tell you about their plan. And they're not going to tell you about everything else on the market. And they're not going to tell you all your different choices. And that is really the most important thing. I would never want my family to be auto-enrolled and lose my choice. I'm disappointed that the federal and state government made it a requirement to auto-enroll people. What I do know is the last numbers I heard, there was 255,000 dual eligible people not enrolled in a dual plan. And from the state's perspective, they're like, we don't understand why. That's just silly. But it's not silly from an independent broker perspective, because they're thinking about doctors, medications, access to certain things that maybe the dual plan isn't going to provide them. So I hope that makes more sense.
It does. It definitely does. The legal question I have to follow up that I'm embarrassed I don't know is, what authority do you need to act? So can you, does somebody have to have guardianship for you to be able to change the plan for their adult child, or power of attorney, or not really that formal requirement there?
It depends.
Okay.
Like it's better. It's better if you have guardianship or power of attorney. Of course, the carrier would prefer that. They do let you do that if you're a parent. But some carriers will ask for additional paperwork. Some carriers don't. So,
Makes
you know,
sense.
I wish things would be really consistent, but you know, it's consistently inconsistent.
We'd be out of work, so no
Right,
fun.
exactly.
Okay, that's a
Um,
fair answer. Thank you.
and I think when you're looking for an independent broker, it's just really important to interview them about what carriers do they have, what carriers do they not have, what is their experience, do they really understand the DDD system, because it's very complex and there's different networks. So DDD has a network and it's really not impacted with the dual plans because those services are carved out with DDD, and then some are not carved out. So just a little bit confusing.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
It's like it's question and answer time for just me. And we will open it up to everybody else too, as I think you're nearing. But you were talking about dental and vision and those types of things. I've also heard a number of clients talk to me about kind of these food cards or other benefits, gym memberships, that type, like kind of things that are getting added on, and they're surprised when they show up, but they're really surprised when they go away. Is there any consistency to that, or is it just kind of a marketing on the plans behalf?
So I'll say that most of the dual plans offer a grocery card. Mercy Care does not offer a grocery card. They offer an over-the-counter benefit. Mercy Care is only in this state. They're just a state carrier, so it's a little bit different. All the other carriers are nationwide carriers generally. And so they have, I think, an easier time of giving some of these benefits that restrict Mercy Care. So gym membership is not something that Mercy Care will give. They have something similar, but doesn't compare really to the gym membership. But what Mercy Care has that the United Healthcare and other carriers doesn't have is Mercy Care has this incredible relationship with St. Joe's and Barrows. So Mercy Care is the only carrier that has every single Barrows doctor and St. Joe's, everything in their network. They're the only one. So that's pretty awesome. The rest of the carriers have Barrows and St. Joe's, at least for trauma, because it's the #1 trauma hospital, but you may not be able to access some of those doctors unless it's trauma. So, there's pros to each carrier and what you can get. And what's important is having someone help you understand what's important to you and then which plan's going to give you that benefit. And the benefits change every year.
And we're in open enrollment still, or is it closed?
We are. Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
we are.
No, we're
Okay.
open enrollment. And then also, if you're a dual eligible person, you actually can change 3 times a year, unlike other people. So you do have a little bit more freedom. It is important to look at the plan. What I see happen a lot is because they were auto enrolled, they don't even know what the plan offers. So when I say, did you get this benefit? They go, huh? What benefit? Like they didn't even know they had that benefit. And the carrier is not going to call you up and go, hey, make sure you use that benefit. Where I send emails and say, don't forget, you have this benefit, use that up. So it's important to at least look at the summary of benefits every year and understand what your adult child is supposed to be getting with that plan, and make sure you're using those benefits. And so this is something we're going to talk about. Access doesn't, I have lots of conversations with Access. They don't seem to understand. They look at every Access carrier as the exact same. They don't see a difference in carrier. They're like, we have the same contract, we require the same benefits, everything's the same, but everything isn't the same. So each carrier has a different network. Each carrier has different processes. And then when you qualify for the dual plans, each carrier really has different benefits. And so you really need to analyze that and not just assume everything's a level playing field, because it's not. And Medicaid is pretty stable, but the dual plans they have to send those to CMS, Center for Medicaid and Medicare, for review every year. And that's why we see a lot of change in dual plans and Medicare Advantage plans, because each carrier is allowed to make money, but they can't make more than 15%. They have to, so they don't want to make too much. If they make too much, they get fined like millions upon millions of dollars. So like during COVID, Humana sent a COVID kit to every member in the whole United States. And some of my clients were like, God, Humana really loves us. And I'm like, no. Humana looked at their bottom line and said, we're going to make too much money, and that's not going to be good for us. So and they can't go out of business, right? So Bright Health just went out of business, lost $1 billion. So each carrier has to design a plan, make sure the usage is correct, make sure they don't go out of business, they don't make too much money, and that they offer enough benefits that people want that plan, and that they pay providers enough that there's enough providers that people want that plan because they can see their provider. So it's a complex system that's reevaluated every single year. So this is a pet peeve of mine, and I don't know that it has to do with the subject necessarily, but I bring it up wherever I can. Access has like a provider tool that you can look up and see if people are access registered. If a provider is access registered, doesn't mean they have a contract with any of the carriers. They cannot legally balance bill you if you're an access member. So I advise families to always go and look up all their providers to see if they're access registered, especially if they're using an employer plan with their Medicaid plan, because lots of times I see people being balance billed illegally. So I just urge you guys all to make sure that you know who's access registered and who isn't, who can legally balance bill you and who can't, and protect yourself. Because many providers don't even know the rule about that. And I just had an interesting conversation with a health plan, access, and a provider who was balance billing lots of people illegally, and they were willing to fight to the death about how it was legal until access explained to them with their contract that they can't, and that's Medicaid fraud. So make sure you're checking. And then I just want to go over who pays first, who pays second. So if you have Medicare and Medicaid, Medicare pays first, Medicare pays first, Medicaid pays second. Medicaid is payer of last resort always. If you have an employer plan pays first, Medicaid pays second. If you have an employer plan with Medicaid and Medicare, it depends on how big of an employer it is. If the employer is over 100 employees, then the employer plan pays, then Medicare, then Medicaid. If the plan has less than 100 employees, then Medicare pays first, the group plan pays second, Medicaid pays third. I would encourage people whose adult children qualify for Medicare to make a plan to get their children off their employer plan. It doesn't have to be like right away, but at some point you will retire and that employer plan will not be available. And it's important to be very thoughtful about how you're picking providers and building your medical team so that there's a very smooth transition. And lots of families don't really think about that long term. And it's really important to think about and sort of have a plan of action. So you don't all of a sudden find your child with Medicare and Medicaid and not, without an employer plan, and suddenly they're losing access to a doctor maybe. And what do? I help you understand the plans. I research everything. I help you find the right carrier. I will always recommend what's right for you, which means I recommend Mercy Care to families all the time. And I'm an advocate inside the plan. So if I enroll you in a plan, then you actually belong to me according to the carrier, and it gives me access to be an advocate for you inside that plan. And that's it. The QR code is a great way to reach me. You can find my website. I have a Facebook group, a Facebook page, and you can reach out if you have questions after this. And I'm excited to see what questions people have.
Well, I have a few here to ask you. If you want to stop sharing your screen, then folks can see us a little better, for better or worse, if you will. There we are. So the first question was, how do I get a copy of the presentation, and are there CEUs? Well, that would have taken us, coordinating that a little bit better, but a good idea. At some point, we will try to get some credits for this, just because it is so informative and helpful. But the presentation can be made available and has been recorded. So we will share a link to the recording when it's up and running. But if you have some ideas, I'm sure Cynthia loves to speak and would be happy to come to your organization or talk, further about setting something up like that.
And balance billing, that's another favorite topic of mine, which we haven't gone over, and third-party billing. So if anybody really loves that subject.
Well, maybe we're going to do that again. No, I love it. So yeah, and I think, for folks who don't already know, following Cynthia on social media, LinkedIn, I learn most of what I learn by following articles you've shared and information you provide. So you're a great resource to the community, and thank you so much for doing that. I attempt to follow in your footsteps and have a decent newsletter, but I learned so much from you. So, okay, the next question is, can you explain the Social Security annual report? Do I complete this?
So I'm not an expert in Social Security. I'm taking a certification, so maybe someday I will be, but I'm not right now. But I believe it's the parent that does it. But Emily, you probably know better than me.
It's the rep payee, is responsible for doing it. There are different reporting requirements based on your relationship and the nature of the Social Security. But generally, yes, you complete this. It's pretty straightforward. I don't hear folks getting in a lot of trouble or having problems with it. With Social Security and with SSI, you can be a penny over for 6 months, and they're going to require you to pay every penny you've gotten paid back to them. It is very, very uber important that you have way less than $2,000 at any time, because you just really don't want to run into that. And I'll just mention, when you were talking about it, Cynthia, there are things like UTMA accounts and 529 accounts that young adults have, and they're not considered available resources until 21. And so they're not a problem until they are a problem. So really, to the extent you can, just double, triple check. Grandma never set up a life insurance policy with a cash value. Nobody was trying to be generous. Use your ABLE accounts, use your special needs trust, use all the tools, that you've hopefully learned about. But big deal. But the report itself, it's a frustration for some, but I don't hear a lot of trouble coming back from it. So do your best, be honest and transparent about it. But most of the time, it's not too difficult to spend $900 a month when we're also reimbursing for room and board and that type of thing. So that's
the other thing I would add to that, just as nobody asked, but if you really ever have trouble with Social Security, the federal senators have someone in their office that's responsible for resolving Social Security issues. So that's a resource that you can go to. Every once in a while, I hear from a family that something's gotten so convoluted and they have two different Social Security offices saying two different things and nobody can figure it out. That's when it's really important to contact your federal senator, either one of them, and ask, because they have someone that does that all day long. And so that's a great resource that some people just don't know about.
And I would say Social Security attorneys too. They
Oh,
live
yeah.
and breathe attorneys, Social Security, and they're set up to practice. And so, I am not a Social Security attorney. I have a YouTube video of an interview with one locally that's really helpful. But they know it too. But I would not worry that hopefully too much with the annual report. So, okay, our next question is: my daughter became disabled at age 17. She is on ALTCS Medicaid. Does she qualify for Medicare? This is kind of like a test. This is fun.
So, first of all, she has to be 18 for the clock to even start. So what can happen is, I've seen this happen a lot where someone's father passed away, and then when they were on SSI because the father passed, and then it automatically at 18 started getting SSDI. And so the soonest that you can actually qualify for Medicare is at 20, because the clock starts at 18.
So to kind of connect the dots, if injured at 17, but then eligible for SSI at 18, and then parent meets their required threshold of disabled, taking retirement benefits, or passed away, then the waiting period, and then Medicare. So there's no date of injury issue. It's instead just making sure we've got the date of disability being prior to 22, correct?
Exactly.
Okay. I feel like I need readers on. Can you speak about getting out-of-state specialists? Yeah, so for like the snowbirds and the folks who are split in time, how do you look at plans for that?
So I have several families that chose a PPO Medicare Advantage plan. And I should talk about this one issue that I didn't mention. In some states, you under the age of 65 can buy a Medicare supplement. And that would give you no network at all. However, in this state, that's not legal. If you're under 65, you don't have that choice. And also, if you qualify for Medicaid, it would be illegal for me to sell you a med sup. But in general, that's something that people that don't meet our criteria might consider. But when we're talking about our population, a PPO plan with a national company, so thinking about a United, a Humana, and like a big national company carrier is someone that you'd want to look at, because they tend to have a national network that you can have access to. And then it's about saying, okay, what doctors do you have in Texas that you want to see, or that kind of thing.
Sounds a little tricky, but sounds like you might be able to help them.
Oh, it's my favorite thing. Like, I seriously, it's like a puzzle, and it's so much fun when you put it together.
Our next one is Social Security again. So it says, my son received Social Security under my Social Security as a disabled adult child. How do we set up a successor rep payee when my wife and I have both passed away? Do you know the answer to that question?
I do not.
Okay. I don't think I do. I don't. I know that I don't know it. My understanding is that you can't do it. So what actually has to happen is that traditionally, through your estate plan, through your will and your trust, you're going to be appointing a successor guardian, and you're going to be appointing a successor trustee and other roles. And one of those individuals will have to reach out at that time. Sometimes individuals will proactively transition. So kind of what you were talking about, not waiting until somebody passes away. Instead, looking at the team that you've set up through your estate plan, and then in advance, getting that person to step in as rep payee, get the accounts all up and running, and then it's one less stressor when the time does come. So I'm pretty positive. That's a bad attorney phrase to say, but I'm pretty sure you can't actually set up that, but those are the things I've seen work before. So, okay. This is a disabled adult child benefit question, and it's about eligibility. So you said that one parent must be retired, disabled, or passed away. If one of the two parents are disabled, would the member qualify even if the parents are divorced and the parent who has paid into Social Security is not the parent with a disability? I can try.
Well, that is a tricky one. But what I would say is you have to have enough work credits And I'm not sure if they're divorced. It gets tricky because it depends on how long they were married, if they met a certain criteria, if they remarried. Like there's some things that can make that difficult to answer.
I would actually, in this case, probably recommend they reach out to Social Security and explain the
Yeah,
situation and see what they're eligible for.
I would too. And the thing is Social Security will automatically enroll you in DAC unless they won't. So I've seen people auto-enrolled all day long, and then some people had to go and ask. And I don't know why. I've never been able to see a difference. The other thing I'll say about that too is if you are collecting on one parent, but the other parent eventually retires and has a ton more money, you can transfer the status from the one parent to the other parent. So that again, you have to do with Social Security.
The other big legal battle I see is when a family, for one reason or another, did not pursue Social Security at age 18. That young adult is no longer so young, but has clearly been the same level of disabled. It's just not determined by Social Security, going back to fight that fight. And what I'll say with that is you're going to need to find an attorney, and it can be a Social Security attorney, and it can be a really hard fight. So based on your circumstances, that's another reason, based on what you said, pursue Social Security. And I do my best to help or tell clients this when they come in, and we still have that opportunity.
I think it's important. Like, we don't know what the trajectory of our child is going to be. And so I'm always like, apply. You can undo things later if you must, but if you don't apply, sometimes you can't fix that. It's unfortunate.
Yeah. Okay, we've got so many questions. People were itching to ask them. Can you explain again how an adult child who is currently SSI eligible and Medicaid eligible can become Medicare eligible?
So they have to be over 18. They have to be diagnosed with a disability before 22. And one of their two parents has to either be collecting retirement, collecting SSDI, or has passed away. And that is when the clock starts. And after 24 months, on the 25th month, you qualify for Medicare. On the very first month, you qualify for up to 50% of the work record of the person. It can be slightly tricky if like mom and child are collecting off the father, then the equation is a little bit different, which is why I say up to 50%, because it's
and caregiver benefits too are something that mess with that formula, but yeah. Okay. Thank you. So, and then the next one is, my son is turning 18 and still in high school. I get SSDI, so the parent gets SSDI. Do you know the difference between extending him for still being in high school versus applying as DAC? He has autism.
I actually don't know the answer to that. Do you, Emily?
I think that potentially, I think it depends somewhat on the family's financial circumstances. Sometimes the child could be receiving a Social Security benefit just by nature of being a minor. And so you do want to try to pursue the disabled status, which my understanding is it would put you direct, once he or she is determined disabled under Social Security's rules, then straight into DAC. But I would pursue sooner rather than later.
I agree.
I agree. How do we know when to complete the SSI report? My son just got his first check in June. They will send you a lot of mail, confusing mail, but that's my understanding is they send you a lot of mail. Do you know, I think it's annual, but I don't know based on when you get approved, and there's retroactive payments, but usually in some of those ridiculously thick mailings of 10 pages of stuff, I'm not sure I understand sometimes. They do set deadlines, but they will also send you the report that you need to complete. So you should have a heads up when that's getting due. Anything to add there?
No, except that I would keep, like, I'm obsessive about keeping records for everything.
And either get a really good scanner and an off hard drive or some giant binders boxes.
Yeah, and something. Well, so for me, I have everything now in the cloud. I scan everything and I have it by year, by everything. But it's better to have more records than not enough. I would just say, make sure you keep everything.
Fair. This is a loaded question. Are there things you cannot spend Social Security funds on? Yes. It depends on the type of Social Security. So Cynthia briefly mentioned spending SSI dollars on food and shelter and how that may impact the full benefit amount. That's called in-kind support and maintenance. There are definitely things you cannot do with money that you have access to as rep payee, that if they don't benefit the applicant, for the disabled person, you can't go about making gifts and borrowing money and all sorts of things that'll get you in big trouble. But generally it is a broader definition, but those would be the things I would want to find out and want to know is what's the nature of the Social Security, how careful do we need to be, and then just making sure everything is benefiting the individual who's intended to benefit. Do you have any other stories or highlights?
The only thing I'd also add is, like, let's say you're getting one of those grocery cards. I mean, you can't buy alcohol. There's a bunch of different things you can't buy with it. It has to be healthy food. It has to meet the criteria that, and I think CMS sets that criteria for the grocery cards of what qualifies and what doesn't, because regardless of carrier, it's the same standard.
Okay. Next question. Hi, my question is, if your child never works before age 24, will they not ever qualify for SSDI, and how is it different from SSI?
So when I was talking about working up to 24, I was talking about one way to qualify for SSDI. So there's many people with autism who are now employed. They might be underemployed. So they might have SSI and a part-time job. I have a few people that actually qualify for SSI but don't get any money because of the income that they're now making. Those people will be earning work credits and then therefore can qualify for SSDI on their own work record. But the DAC program that we were talking about is when you qualify on your parents' work record. And the rules around that are that they have to be over 18. They have to have been disabled at 22 or below. They have to have a parent who has either passed away on SSDI, SS retirement. They have to have enough work credits, and the individual cannot be married, and they're collecting SSI. And so then they would qualify when the parent does one of those three things.
Yeah. It's a long question or answer, but okay. The next question is, what is an ABLE account? Thank you. So like we've said many times, I can spend a day on this topic. I would encourage you to go find other resources. If you look at my YouTube channel, I've got some recordings on there. But generally what I'll say quickly is that an ABLE account is a tool. And it's a tool in a set of toolkit, in a toolbox. We've got that. We've got first party special needs trust. We've got third party special needs trust. We've got spending assets down. But it's a way that we can use resources and income that would otherwise disqualify us from continuing to receive SSI or ALTCS, or, well, those are the two big ones. But so an ABLE account is a tool that if the dollar amount or level of income is low enough, we can use it. You can only contribute up to, next year it'll be $18,000 a year. This year it's $17,000, and that's combined sources, so it's not everybody. They have lower costs for establishing them than they do third-party trusts or first-party trusts. However, they also have to pay back to the state. So there's a lot of pros and a lot of cons. I would encourage you to spend some time looking into them. If you don't have a third-party special needs trust or supplemental needs trust in place, it may be a different tool that is very, very helpful to have. But ABLE accounts have definitely a place in the toolbox and are really useful for certain things. But I wouldn't encourage you to use an ABLE account as a long-term savings opportunity, because there's just a lot of restrictions and there is a state payback provision. Is that a fair, quick summary?
And I think the other thing that I kind of like the rumor I've been hearing lately is that the ABLE account can take the place of the special needs trust, which it cannot. So I don't know if you want to address that.
Yeah, so and originally when the laws were going through Congress and DC, I mean, that was the goal, but they are capped at $17,000, which gets adjusted for inflation. That's why it'll go up to 18 next year. Total annual contributions. And so in the event a parent is passing away, you may feel like you don't have a lot of money, but if you've got a $50,000 life insurance policy, or you've got a 401k, or you've got any equity in your home, that's going to be too much money. And if you haven't set up the estate plan and prepared your own supplemental needs or special needs trust to hold it, then that means we're looking at a different tool. Or, you know, if somebody gets in a serious accident or is injured and it's more than that $17,000 or $18,000, it just doesn't alleviate the need for a special needs trust. They have their time and place. There's different types of those. Again, that's why we could talk about it all week probably. But yeah, they don't replace them, but there are good examples for using ABLE accounts. It's just, you really want to understand what's best for your situation. Okay. I know we're way over, and I think a few people have signed off, but not many. A lot of you are sticking around. So, but thank you if you do need to sign off. Okay. I had an appointment to reestablish my son's SSI that got turned off, and I didn't know. They blew me off on my appointment day and said to wait until he's 18 next month to apply. Does this sound right? Every time I call, I can't get someone to speak to. So I'll just say anytime I need to call to Social Security, I block an entire morning or afternoon. And the hard part is that oftentimes you're on hold. And what I would, my experience lately has been, it's best to wait on hold, but make an in-person appointment. I don't know, because he's not yet 18. That may be accurate sometimes with SSI. When you're under 18, they're looking at the family's financial resources, and as soon as you turn 18, it's the individual's. So it is probably true that in this case, if it was too far ahead of an 18th birthday, it may have been better to do that. And if that's why it got turned off, because the family started having more money, that's a fair answer. In general, I made a note of this when one of the very first things you were talking about was some, you know, tips you've learned from other families and when you're applying. And I make this joke all the time, but try to make it easy for them and kill them with kindness, because I know how painful it is to wait hours and hours and to get ditched and all of that, but it doesn't matter to the person you do finally get it on the phone. They're not the right person to take it out on. So to the extent, try to give them patience, but you don't have another solution. So sometimes it's just going to be that, but I would try to, find a way to forgive them, or at least pretend to be super nice and accommodating. Do you have anything else?
And also, you can call the local office. They try to hide the numbers of the local offices now.
They keep trying harder and harder, but
yeah, I got a list. I got a secret list that I'm guarding my life. So you can call the local office, but if you're on hold for more than 15 minutes, it'll transfer to the national office. Anyone who answers the phone at the national office is just an appointment setter. They're not going to resolve anything that you have. You can go in person, and sometimes they're super receptive to that, and sometimes they're not. And I hear different things.
Pay attention what day of the month it is. I would not go the first week of the month, because everybody goes the first week of the month. And you need to find out which local office is yours, and that is pretty easy to find on their website. You just put in your zip code. So I like that idea too. Okay. How does a member qualify for the $914 SSI amount? Currently, my son receives $799. So a couple of things. It's kind of a strange number. Usually when I hear they're not getting the full amount, they're getting closer to it being reduced by a third, which is that they're not paying rent or they're not paying something, and it's an in-kind support and maintenance. I wonder, $799, perhaps there's a small child support payment, because once you're 18, child support is technically yours. Maybe they are doing some employment, but there's something that's getting offset. I don't know exactly what it is, and it looked like you were kind of hemming and hawing over there too. It wasn't clear to you. Is that true, Cynthia?
Well, I'll say this. Sometimes, like I just met someone the other day that's only getting 600,
But to me,
And
that's an in-kind support and maintenance
yeah,
number.
well, actually, what was weird for her is she was 64, right? So the government doesn't tell you to go apply, but I told her to go back in and apply for Social Security for the aged. And so then she got the 914. So the other thing I always wonder is like, it doesn't seem like the government does a good job of double checking to make sure that they've qualified you for everything you might qualify for. So I would go in and ask them to show you how they did the accounting.
Our 16-year-old receives SSI since birth. It's a long question, so I'm reading to see if I might be able to summarize. So there's some questions about, so it's a 16-year-old who received SSI and then they went off of benefits and then back on because the husband took retirement. Will it stop when he's 18 and would I have to reapply for SSI? So if the father of the child took retirement, then I wonder if the benefit he's receiving is partially disabled adult child benefits and partially SSI now. It just would also depend on if there's been a disability determination. Sometimes minors are eligible for benefits and sometimes you have to be disabled. So there's a number
I
of...
had always heard that you had to reapply at 18. Like you had to do a new application at 18. Same with DDD, you have to do a new application at 18. So I would think you would still have to apply, wouldn't you?
Well, but so my experience is though, when somebody has been determined eligible because of a disability status, they don't go back through and redetermine disability per se, depending on the nature of the disability. Then it's usually just financial kind of hoop you have to jump through. But yeah, I don't have enough information to let you know, but it might be helpful to reach out to a Social Security attorney and kind of give them the facts and see what they say. And definitely call Social Security right before that 18th birthday. Let's see. Somebody said our son has autism and other diagnoses. There's not much of a question to it, but the only thing I can think of there to be mindful of is, Cynthia, you were mentioning when applying for Social Security to really bring in all of the diagnoses and how that impacts their ability to be substantially gainfully employed. The only caveat I'll say to that is if we're instead looking at ALTCS, you do have to understand that if it's a mental illness co-diagnosis, you have to be really careful about what's causing what symptoms or what's impacting things, and being clear about that. Whenever I look at the, sorry, some of these questions are kind of piecemeal. What happens if the child's disabled adult child benefits exceeds $2,000 a month? Would it impact access eligibility? You want to go first? You want me to?
Well, I'll tell you what it's not supposed to. If you're ALTCS, if you're access, it can, is what I've been told. So when I've talked to, because I've had some extensive conversations with access and trying to nail down their policies regarding that. And it's a little bit hard to get them to commit to certain things, but they have said to me that access, if you're access, not ALTCS, they 100% will kick you off. But that ALTCS is a different animal, and that's all I really know.
ALTCS has, so the $2,000 makes me think you're thinking of the resource limit, which means that yes, each month they will have to spend a large portion of that income so that they remain month to month under $2,000 for resources. But the income limit for ALTCS is actually higher. And depending on the nature of the earnings, you can use different tools to overcome having too much income for ALTCS. So we can use what's called an income-only trust in some cases. If it's work, sometimes there's right to work or return to work programs that allow us to have more. So it really depends on that. But yeah, if the DAC benefit is over $2,000, it technically would impact access medical insurance benefit, but you may be using access to mean ALTCS.
Yeah,
It's not.
so that's supposed to. And then the other thing I was going to say, that Part B premium. So if their income goes higher, then and they have access, they will be billed the Part B premium. But if they have ALTCS and their income is high like that, ALTCS is still supposed to pay the Part B premium. But I haven't seen it in writing. So
We have an appointment tomorrow with Social Security, changing SSI to SSDI, but the half parent Social Security is more. Do they lose SSDI credits? So I don't know enough about the situation, but the appointment, if you're talking about the SSDI for the individual, if you otherwise have a parent who's retired, receiving Social Security, retirement benefits, disability benefits, or has passed away, you'll still get the DAC if it's more, correct?
yeah.
Yeah. So I just, I don't know if you're suggesting you're going in tomorrow to get rolled on from SSI to SSDI for that individual's employment record, or if you're going to roll from SSI to what they're calling, or somebody has said SSDI, meaning DAC. So that's part of it's just the language piece. But
and your minimum amount is going to be $914.
Yeah.
And sometimes that'll be SSDI and SSI at $914, and sometimes it'll be more. It is based on the work record, so it's hard to know.
Yeah. But now you're more educated to have a good conversation with them and push them where they need to be pushed and hopefully get some answers. Good luck. Can a member receive both SSI and DAC payments? Yes.
Yes.
So you just said, right? If it's not $914, if the disabled adult child payment is $600, then they'll get the $314 in SSI to make up for it. My daughter has MedBen. Do you know what that is?
No.
I don't either. So MedBen through DAD, child support order, they won't cover anything they deem related to autism, even speech after tongue tie surgery. They deny everything and all providers try to fight them. It seems like it may be a good opportunity to have the insurance benefits evaluated. I don't know enough
Absolutely.
about it. I don't know anything about that program.
And autism isn't supposed to be an exclusion anymore. So it would be interesting to know more, like what state they're in, and but that's not enough information to.
Yeah. Can she call you?
Yeah, call me. I'll
Okay.
at least figure it out.
Last question, I think. My son is 20 and receives SSI. Could he possibly be auto-enrolled in the disabled adult child benefits? And if he isn't, should we enroll him?
So it really depends on whether one of the parents is retired, taking retirement benefits on SSDI, or has passed away, because that is really the trigger for that benefit, and then has enough work credits. Yeah.
So in essence, probably would be auto-enrolled, but that's what Cynthia was saying earlier. So sometimes it just doesn't happen. And so if you know one of those events has taken place, then absolutely reach out and enroll him. But if he's 20, you're in good shape because he is already getting SSI. Just one of those life events happens with one of the parents. That's when you want to pursue that. So holy buckets, that was a lot of questions, but kind of fun. So with that, Cynthia, thank you so much. I learned a lot. I took some good notes. Had never heard of EPSDT, so I love.
Oh, that's my other favorite subject. Oh, I just love all insurance. I can't even tell you. Once you understand what's written, then you can use that written word to get what you need, right? I mean, that's what you do as a lawyer.
It is. I don't know that I feel that way about insurance, but I love that you love that, and we can each love our own thing. No, thank you so much for your time. Again, if people stuck around this long, what's the best way to reach you? Email, phone, website?
Email me, Cynthia at CMAC Insurance, or go to my website, cmacinsurance.com. Find me on Facebook. I have a Facebook group, Developmental Disabilities in Arizona, where I post a lot of advocacy stuff in there. And then you can always give me a call, 602-571-1118.
Ooh, fun phone number. I like it. Um, well, thank you. I really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
And if anybody else has any questions for me, always happy to help answer them. But I would encourage you to keep learning more. I learn something every time we have one of these, and I think it's great. And I imagine Cynthia and I will continue to do some workshops together in the future, but individually, we also do all sorts of stuff. So getting involved and staying educated is super helpful. So thank you. Anybody needs anything, please feel free to reach out to us. And then the email I did send out to everybody, it's got all of Cynthia's contact information, and I'll send a follow-up. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.